Welcome to the Real Freedom Podcast, where we inspire you to pursue your passion to gain time and financial freedom through opportunities in real estate. I'm your host, Mike Swenson. Let's get some real freedom together. All right, welcome everybody to another episode of the Real Freedom Podcast. And today I'm so excited to share with you, we have Kimberly Kesterke, and she is the founder of the W2 Landlord. So for those of you that have been in real estate full time for a long time and still try to figure out how to get everything done that you need to get done, Kimberly is doing it all and working her regular W2 job. And so obviously a lot of structure and a lot of processes that you've put in place over the years, but your backstory is really you became an accidental landlord when the market shifted, values went down, and you had to leave because of a job relocation. And so that's how you're kind of forced into that. And now you've turned that into an awesome opportunity, 20 units, closing on 2 more today, primarily in Georgia. Then you also have North Dakota and New York. So we'll get into the details, but welcome. And we're so excited to have you on the show.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Mike.
I'm kind of in a similar boat as you in terms of how I became a landlord, because we bought in 2006. The values went down, watched all my neighbors short sale or foreclose on their properties. And we were looking to move, and we had to look up and say, what are we going to do? Are we going to stay here, or are we going to try to rent it out? And I had a coworker of my wife's that was looking for a townhouse, and that's how we were able to get out. But we were stuck in a 5-year arm. We had no intention of staying it past 5 years. And then the market shifted and everything tanked and we were stuck. So tell us about your story.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing. So my backstory is pretty similar. So I was 26 years old. I had purchased a house in Augusta, Georgia. And that was around 2006, and 2008 happened. And I found myself $30,000 underwater. And at that age, I didn't have $30,000 to take to a closing table. So really selling the property was completely out of the question. And then on top of that, my job relocated me to Atlanta, which is about 3 hours away from Augusta. So I really had to pivot and figure out what I was going to do. And I was talking to some friends, and it turned out that they had a friend that was a young couple that they wanted to rent for a while. And so, I just kind of fell into it. I didn't do any screening. I didn't do any background checks. I didn't have any sort of processes in place. Gosh, I think I downloaded a free lease offline. Like I really just didn't have the tools I have today. But, that's really how I got started and how I started learning how to manage a property from a distance, how to really do this. And just from then, over the years have acquired 20 units. A lot of those are duplexes, a couple triplexes, and a couple single families. So it's been a lot of fun these past few years, past decade and a half, and just excited because constantly learning new things.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of people, they're always cautious to start, and it sounds like we were in a similar boat where you're able to find a connection to hopefully give you enough courage to make that leap, where it's like, for us, it was okay. It was a coworker of my wife's. Now that could have turned out badly as well if they stopped paying or they were bad tenants, but we knew them and we'd hung out with them a little bit before. But for us, that was the thing that allowed us to take the risk. And for you, it was, at least having that connection to the person going in. And then you got to run the numbers and make sure that you're able to pay for it and able to cover your expenses. But that first step and that first risk is huge. And then I think after that, it gets a little bit easier.
Yeah, it absolutely gets easier. I mean, at first it was a little bit intimidating, but my whole goal and benchmark was, as long as it covers my expenses, I'm good. I'm just going to wait the market out, was really my initial thought. But then over time, I started seeing all these great benefits like depreciation at tax time, hedge against inflation, all of these really great things about owning property that just started gaining my confidence to start investing in more. So it went from just, as long as I can cover my expenses, to really building a business, which has been a lot of fun.
So then how did you get the second property, kind of your first intentional property? How did that come together? And then how did you finance that? I know so many people are curious about how that comes together.
Yeah. So, it's interesting. I was driving back from Augusta because I went over, I would visit once like every 6 months, really,
Hmm.
just to kind of make sure everything was fine. And just something kind of hit me and just said, if you've never had a vacancy, never had an eviction, I mean, this was 5 years in at the time. And, you're gaining confidence, why don't you invest in the same neighborhood? Because obviously there's renter demand, all of these things. So
Hmm.
that's really how I decided to start doing it again. And then I started thinking, well, I'm probably not going to do a single family. I'd like to do a duplex because
Hmm.
then I have one side covering all the expenses, the other one profiting, was really in my thought process. So I
Hmm.
really went out to look for duplexes at that time. And how I ended up financing it, because I have the full-time job, the W2, I was able to get a conventional loan, just do a 20% down conventional loan. And that's really how I started. And then, over time with other units, I've done other things more creatively, like I've done hard money lending, I've done private lending, some of these other alternatives. But I think if you're just getting started and you want to take a conservative approach, a conventional loan, really, even today with the interest rates going up, is still a really good way to
Hmm.
secure leverage and to purchase a property.
The sticky thing is saving up, right? So I think, I've heard this before where, everybody wants to have a lot of units. And the key is you have to be a good steward and do a good job with the units that you have to be able to grow. Because yeah, if you can't manage your money with just one unit, you're going to have a hard time as it grows. So for those folks that do want to save up and build that nest egg or build that piece to do a conventional loan, that's big. The other option is, yeah, finding some private lenders or things like that. If you do have a good deal, but then you have to, it gets a little bit more complex. But yeah, I think that's a very safe, stable, great opportunity for your second one, is have that money saved up and then do that conventional loan.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't want to discourage people if, say, they don't have the funds set up. I look at real estate investing in a way that you have to just look at what resources do you have. So, do you
Mhm.
have cash in the bank, or, a 401k that you can put into a self-directed IRA and kind of use that? Like, look at the resources you have available. Or do you have time on your hands? Because if you have more time than money, then there are different real estate strategies that you can get involved in right away, such as, bird dogging. Like, that's basically finding a property, matching it up to a wholesaler
Mhm.
or a investor, and just getting a finder's fee. So you do enough of those, like, you can start saving money. Or wholesaling, that's another thing you can do without a lot of money to start. And then you just
Mhm.
start saving the money, and then you can get into those conventional loans or some of those other hard money loans or things along those lines. It doesn't just have to be one strategy, is what I'm saying.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and for a wholesaler, the benefit of, for somebody in your shoes where you're busy or working another job, is a wholesaler goes and finds those deals, and it saves you time because you don't have to find the deals yourself. And if the numbers work, you're still willing to pay somebody because they get that kind of a wholesaling fee in the middle, for those folks that don't know about that. And so it saves you time. You have to find ways to build leverage, right? And if you don't have time, you want to use the time that other people have. And if they present a good deal to you and it makes sense, well, great, you can move forward and you're happy to pay them because your numbers still work. If the numbers don't work, then you wait to go find a property where the numbers finally work out for you.
Absolutely. I think too, having a full-time job and real estate investing, exactly what you just said. So it's really networking with real estate agents, it's networking with wholesalers. I mean, all the properties that I purchased either came to me from someone in my network, either a real estate agent who knew this was coming onto the market and they wanted to let me know,
Mhm.
or even wholesalers reaching out and just sharing what they have. So just things to keep in mind, for people who are looking to get started on where they can find deals.
And what's because you have a lot of properties in Augusta, what is the market like in Augusta? For people that don't know, they obviously know of the golf tournament, but outside of that, like how does that impact things? Because I know it's chaos too. You've got all these people coming into town, but at the same point in time, there's a economic factor of having the golf course there that benefits the community. But yeah, what's Augusta like?
Yeah, so what I really like about the Augusta market is it's one of those unique markets that it's not going to skyrocket all the way up when the times are good, but it's not going to deteriorate and go down when the times are bad. Like, yeah, I was underwater 30 grand, but it didn't go any further than that. And it really stays more even keel, which I like. So as a conservative investor, I kind of like markets that are stable. And then on top of that, it has really good industry that you don't really hear a lot about. So it has a government base out there, a military base. Fort Gordon is out there. So you've got that leg there with a lot of people coming in and out, transient, over at the military base. Then you have this really big medical college of Georgia. They now renamed it Augusta University, but it's this huge medical complex that brings in a lot of people doing their residency. Those are like 2 to 4 year right there. So you've got that that sector. And then you have just the regular industry. I mean, Kimberly Clark is there. There's a lot of manufacturing and industrial in Augusta as well. So the way I look at it, and at way you want to look at any market, if you're going to invest outside of where you live, is you want something that has, say, 3 to 5 good industries, so that if one thing goes away, you still have these other things helping. And then on top of that, there's just a lot of transient people coming in and out that prefer to rent for a while rather than buy a home.
When you run an analysis and you're looking at maybe the cash flow opportunity on a property versus the appreciation opportunity on a property, where do you land on that? Some people like cash flow, some people like appreciation, some are like you said, originally it's just, I want to make sure my expenses are covered. That's the bare minimum.
Right.
But as you're analyzing deals now in the future, as you're more sophisticated, you have more properties, you're thinking bigger and longer term. How are you analyzing those properties to help make decisions on where you want to be?
Yeah, so for me, 100% is cash flow, because I look at the real estate investing as my retirement plan. That's what I'm going to retire on. That's what I'm going to live off of when I finally decide to retire. So my number one thing is cash flow. And I look at cash flow because appreciation is a good thing. But to me, that's a bonus. The inflation protection, that's a bonus. The depreciation, tax, all the things you can do, tax write-offs, those are just bonuses. But it's the cash flow. It's what am I getting from the mailbox or put into my bank account every single month, and how is that tracking? So I look at all different types of strategies to really boost cash flow aspect. So when I'm analyzing a property, I'm looking at a lot of different things from a cash flow basis, whereas a lot of investors look at it differently, and it just all depends on what your goals are.
Yep. And I think too, just to go back to your point about analyzing a market, if you have 1 or 2 properties in the city that you live in, that's fantastic. But yeah, if you're going to do it at a larger scale, you do want to look at the big picture industries to find out what's happening, because there's properties out there where you can buy them for $5,000, but you can't even rent it to anybody. And so that's where you are looking at, if the cash flow makes sense, fantastic. You want to also just strengthen that through the strength of the community or the town or the city that you're investing in, because you don't want to have, hey, I've got 5 rentals in this city and it's only based on, kind of one primary industry. Something happens and they, that facility leaves, all those job leaves, and then now the town dries up. You have to find that stability, and running a good analysis like that's important.
Yeah, and there's some really great tools online. I use NeighborhoodScout. They have a lot of really good free options. I mean, you can pay for it and get even more analytics, but everything that I've ever needed to figure out has all been on the free version. And that's what are the industries, what's the median income, and then I just go on Zillow to see what are rents looking like.
And are there certain numbers or certain things that you're attempting to hit here when you're looking at the viability of a city? Or is it just kind of like, okay, I've got the 3 industries, I've got that, everything else looks good? Or how sophisticated are you in that analysis of a community?
Yeah, so definitely the industries. In terms of median income, I guess, I'm not really a stickler on that, because what I want to look at really is what are homes renting for and what are they like selling for. I like to see kind of a, 3-2. I mean, even if it's a duplex or a 2-2, 2-bedroom, 2-bath, or a 3-bedroom, 2-bath renting for at least $1,000. Do you know what I'm saying? Like that to me kind of shows a really healthy rent. And then usually, when it comes to just the incomes and things like that, just as long as you're targeting a certain avatar, everybody's got their different tenant that they want to target to. I just always find that the tenants will come. So I'm not too big on the median income, but I am big on what the rents are, the price, and the industries.
So quick to recap then. So how many units do you have in Augusta?
So a big majority of my portfolio is still in Augusta. So out of the 20 units, soon to be 22, 18 of those are in the Augusta area. So now my next strategy is I'm looking more in Marietta, Georgia. That's close to where I live. Especially, Marietta, just because it's got a couple hospitals for traveling nurses. There's, we're seeing a lot of demand for housing, kind of medium-term rentals, like what we were talking about earlier, and just kind of utilizing that strategy a little bit more.
Yeah. So then now that, with your day job, and we talked about finding good leverage, how is that process for managing the properties, finding a property manager? How did that process work for you?
Sure. So the first 15 years, I ended up doing all of my own management, but then it really got to a point, I think it was right around the 15 unit mark, that it just was too much. I mean, I had processes in place. I had, really good systems, but it really came down to the point that I've got to have somebody do this for me. So I ended up finding an excellent property manager, and she just does a great job. And really all I have to do every month is I've got to go in, I've got a QuickBooks. I go in, I reconcile everything. She lets me know if there were work orders. We're on the Buildium platform. That's what she uses. So I'm able to see any work orders and just able to track it that way. So really my monthly management of my properties is maybe just an hour or two of the back and forth with her, and then reconciling QuickBooks every single month. And it's just really made my life a whole lot easier.
Yeah. I can't even imagine trying to self-manage 15 properties as well as work a full-time job.
It got really stressful. I'm not going to lie. I have an 8-year-old, and she was probably 5 at the time when I finally, or 5 or 6. And she just still is like, no, I'm never going to do, she calls it real estating, never going to do real estating. Cause she just see I just be like, oh my gosh, I've got another thing I've got to deal with, my phone was ringing a lot. So just hiring a property management company, even early on, you don't have to wait till I did, you don't have to get to 15 units, just hire them early. It's definitely worth the money.
Yeah. Yeah. When we run analysis for on our real estate team for our investors, we actually just in our calculator bake in the cost of a property manager. And some people choose not to, but it's better to make a decision, kind of like what you were talking about before and how you're analyzing it. If you've already got the property manager built in and you still think it's a good decision and you're not using them, well, then happy day when you do decide to use them, it's still a good financial decision versus it's already tight and now I have to pay a property manager. That might go from a positive cash flow to a negative cash flow. You want to at least make sure you have enough cushion. So we just build in that cushion in our analysis and say, hey, you can decide if you want to do that because at some point when you get big enough and sophisticated enough, you're going to want that, that time back.
Right. 100%.
In your Facebook community where you're helping other people who are balancing the W2 landlord life, what are some of the big questions that people have, or what are kind of some of the big things that you make sure that you want to educate them on?
Yeah, so I get a lot of questions. Just how do I get started? How do I start? How do I get my first deal? So we talk a lot about that. I bring people into the group, do Facebook Lives to just really cover a lot of those strategies. I mean, there's a strategy for everything in real estate. And I mean, it could be anywhere from seller financing, it can be wholesaling, it could be, fix and flip. There's just a lot of different ways. So we talk a lot about those different strategies. And then other questions we get then is how do I get started? And then how do I acquire? So either find the deal or fund the deal. So we're just talking about those things all the time. And then people in the community, they'll post their projects, what they're working on. And it's highly engaged, which is fun. It's really neat to kind of see people's projects and their content and everything. So it's just a really great place. Like if you want to start networking and learning, it's a free way to do so.
Yeah, that's awesome. Cause it's the chicken or the egg thing. Like for some people, it's like, I don't really know what to do. I've got to save money, but I've got to find a property. I've got to talk to a lender. I got to, like, and they just don't really know where to get started. And you kind of just have to finally throw a dart at the wall, start with something, and then build from there. So, yeah. And, going back to what you said, and trying to raise your daughter and do your other job. What were some of the important systems that you put in place, or just kind of managing your time in your daily life as a parent and as an employee and as an entrepreneur? How were you able to do that?
Yeah. So the biggest process I put in place that made my life a lot easier was in the lease, I defined what the timelines would be for responses on service and maintenance calls. So I defined what an emergency was. It's a fire, it's a flood. I mean, those are obvious emergencies. So that I gave them a system, not necessarily a system, but instructions what to do.
Right.
They had to know how to turn the water off. And then if it's a fire, call 911 and then let me know ASAP. Well, thank goodness that never happened. Right.
Right.
So then the next tier are the maintenance requests that have to be done, but that is a maintenance ticket. It gets emailed over to me. I have 24 hours to respond to them and start scheduling a contractor. And then on top of that, they have to agree, or they had to agree to be able to coordinate with the contractor their schedule. I was not the middleman in coordinating the tenant and the contractor's schedule. It was, they had to let me know. I would execute the contractor, and then the contractor would call the tenant and do all the coordination. Then the contractor would send me the invoice. So that really cut down a tremendous amount of time where all I had to do was check the email, call the contractor, or even shoot a text over to the contractor at that point, because I had some good relationships with different people, and then they would go do the rest. So basically a process that could take hours all the way down to maybe 15 minutes.
And I'm sure it took a little bit of time too to find the right people to work with from a contractor's perspective. And I think that's another thing for people that are newer. It's okay that things are messy. It's okay that you don't have it all figured out, because even as a real estate agent, we're still looking for great contractors to work on properties, and you can never have enough of them because they might have just done a big job, or they might be busy and tied up. So if your number one isn't available, you're going to have a number two and maybe have a number three. And so that takes time, and it's okay to struggle through that a little bit. But now I'm sure with the volume that you have, you do have some great people and some great relationships you've built up.
Yeah. And one thing I learned probably the hard way is I tried to go with the cheapest people at the beginning. And what I found is a lot of times I'd have to get it done twice. So I have kind of figured out that the people that are out there with the good looking truck, they're going to be a little pricier, but it's going to get done right the first time. And if it's not, they're going to back up their work. They'll warranty it. There's a lot of things they do that justifies that bit of the higher price. So that's, as I've grown as an investor, I really go and look for the highly rated contractors now. And usually they are going to cost a little bit more money. It's just what I've learned. And it's worth it.
Well, and I like even you just, as an owner of a rental property, you probably have a longer value approach to your property versus even like myself. As in my home, we've lived in, we've kind of rehabbed a few homes over time, but I think we've lived in 5 or 6 homes in the span of 15 years. And so in some regards, when I'm looking to get something fixed, I'm probably thinking through the lens of, well, if we, this home hopefully will be in for a little bit longer. Now that we've got kids, we've settled a little bit. But even at the time when I was thinking through repairs, I was thinking like, oh, we're going to sell in 2 or 3 years. So we just need to have kind of the 2 or 3 year repair. When you're a landlord now owning a property for 15 years, you're thinking, I want to have this never happen again. So I want to get it done right the first time. And like you said, finding that reputable person that's going to get it taken care of correctly is a whole lot better than, hey, I got to have the same thing every 3 years or every 5 years because I tried to skimp a little bit that first time. If you're owning a property for 15 years and for you another 15 years, you want to make sure it's the right quality. And to do that, it's going to cost you a little bit more money.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree.
So talk a little bit about some of the seller financing. You had brought that up. What are some strategies that you have? If somebody identifies a property, maybe trying to figure out if seller financing is an option.
Yeah. So in terms of seller financing, as the buyer buying with seller financing or selling with, because I've done both sides of the transaction.
I was thinking mostly just buying properties with seller financing. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of people out there that want to sell their homes that don't necessarily need all the money up front. I know that sounds crazy, but what they do want is they want that reliable monthly income without necessarily having to deal with the expenses of the home. So the couple transactions that I've done, really that was the case. It was somebody that wanted to sell, but they didn't want to take on the tax burden of the sale right away. So they wanted to chunk it up over time. And then that allowed me to provide monthly payments. So I've done a couple of those transactions. And then how I found this particular transaction was, believe it or not, a wholesaler called me and they wanted to purchase one of my properties. And I was trying to sell it to the wholesaler or to one of their investors as the bank, right? As the person holding the financing. And he just said, well, I don't really know if we can do that on that property. And I said, well, are there any properties that you've had to walk away from because you couldn't make the numbers work? Because as a buyer of a seller financing transaction, you can go a little higher on the purchase price. You just have to make the terms work for you. And he goes, well, let me think about that. I just talked to a lady that we had to say no to, and let's see if she'll be open to that. So he ended up coordinating the introduction. We ended up coming to a deal, and he got a finder's fee for just making a simple phone call and connecting us together. So I think, a lot of wholesalers, they don't look at it that way. And that was the only wholesaler that's ever really been open to like passing me a throwaway deal. But I think they're out there, and I think it's a really creative way for investors to really start these introductions with some of these sellers, and talk about seller financing.
So how does that conversation happen with the seller then?
So it's just basically just letting them know who I am and just telling them I would like to buy your house, but I'd like to buy it in payments, and kind of just pause and let them come back. And, a lot of times people are going to say no, just only because they don't understand. And then it's a conversation of educating them. Well, hey, this is how much we can do down. This is how much you can get a month. This is when it's going to be fully paid off. And, we'll get a law office to draw up the paperwork, so then that way they feel secure in knowing that it's a legal transaction that they're engaging in, not just a back of the napkin, whatever.
Not Kimberly coming along trying to scam somebody and steal their property.
Right. Exactly. And so, full title gets transferred, it's basically exactly like any other closing. It's just that now they're holding the mortgage, they're holding the note, and I'm paying that note to them rather than to Wells Fargo or, whoever.
Yeah. And the benefit for you is you don't have to go through the pre-approval with a lender and all of that process that can, once you start to acquire more properties, it can get more complex. It allows you to continue to acquire more properties without having to have those credit checks, the finance checks, all that kind of stuff that goes with the pre-approvals and the appraisals and the lending requirements and this, that, and the other. Yeah.
It's a much easier process. And honestly, moving forward, that's how I'm going to opt to just acquire my deals. Either I'm going to buy homes cash or I'm going to buy them seller financing, because I'm just kind of at the point I feel like I've got enough mortgages. I don't want to bring on another one. And this is a really great way to keep acquiring.
Yeah. Now, we had talked a little bit offline ahead of time about, kind of midterm rentals, furnished rentals for professionals, traveling nurses, that type of thing. So talk about, some of the opportunity that people might see in that. Obviously there's a lot being made about short-term rentals, Airbnb, that kind of stuff. There's a great market that's happening there. You're finding that, rising costs to own the property, rising interest rates, The traditional rentals, sometimes it gets a little bit trickier. But talk about kind of that midterm opportunity that's out there for people and what you're seeing.
Yeah, so I really tested this strategy out in my own home, believe it or not. I renovated a garden level or a basement that I had, and I have a 500 square foot garden level studio apartment. And it has been booked ever since April of 2021. And it's been booked by traveling nurses. It's been booked by people that have sold their homes quickly and aren't going to the closing table for another 3 months or something.
Mm-hmm.
It's been booked by just, people that are in town for 3 months. And I didn't want to necessarily do the standard Airbnb or short-term model because that's, usually 3 days to a week. There's a lot of turnover. There's a lot of cleaning. There's just a lot of chance for things to get damaged. But a medium-term rental, what I really like about it is it's less turnover. You've got reliable people staying. And believe it or not, I mean, the place is well taken care of because they know that they're going to be there for 3 months or so, not just trash it for a weekend and be on there. So I really like that medium-term rental strategy.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, like thinking about short-term rentals, if you happen to live in a spot where people want a vacation, like that is their vacation time. That's their party time where they're going to be up late. You might have impact on the neighbors and that sort of thing. And so, yeah, that medium term, you get a chance to get a higher rent, a good quality tenant, because these are usually traveling professionals. And like you said, because they're going to be there longer than just a couple nights, they want to take care of it. So they're treating it more like their own home. And so it's a happy medium ground between, there are great high returns that can happen on a short-term rental, more so than a longer-term rental. And at the same time, there's a lot of benefit there.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that experiment really has motivated me to convert a lot of my long-term rentals into these more medium terms. The 2 units I'm picking up today are going to be basically furnished and rented out. So it's going to be, marketed to traveling nurses. And another market that I think a lot of people overlook that is a huge demand, you just don't hear a lot about it, are insurance companies have to place people when there's insurance losses. So fire losses or, flood or a pipe breaks and, the contractor is going to take them 3 months. That's another market for this medium term rental strategy.
Mm-hmm. And how are you marketing that? How are you finding those people? Are there certain websites you're posting it on or what?
Yeah, so Furnished Finder is a really good website for traveling nurses, but then there's people that are just looking for furnished rentals on there. And then with the insurance companies, there's a lot of different loss insurance companies out there that you can actually input your property as an option there. And so when there is a loss and your property meets the criteria for whatever family or scenario, then they'll pick up the phone and they have this list and they'll call you. They'll go down the list really. And a friend of mine, she had somebody in her place for 6 months because of it. So it's just, again, just another dart that you can throw at the wall and just put all these little seeds out there and just see what blossoms.
Yeah. So the question that I know a lot of people probably ask you is, you are making enough money with your rental properties to cover your expenses. Why don't you just quit your job?
Right. And sometimes, I wonder the same thing, but so what I'm doing right now is I'm working for a startup and it's really rewarding. It's really challenging and I'm learning a lot. So it's just, I'm learning a lot of really great skills. And so I'm enjoying it. And I think what my message is to people is that, get into something you enjoy or do real estate, full time. You don't have to keep both. But I just want to give people the encouragement that you can do both if you want. You can keep work that you love doing and utilize real estate investing as more of your retirement plan or, just something that helps build wealth. You don't necessarily have to do one or the other. And I think you hear a lot of that messaging of it's one or the other. And my whole thing is, why can't you just do both? Just put processes in place, hire the right people, and just do what you enjoy.
Yeah. And it's about having the freedom of choice. We talk about, real freedom. It's real estate leveraged freedom. If you want to work and do that, great. I always joke about how my in-laws both retired, and now they're working because they're doing the work that they enjoy doing. And
Right.
so my father-in-law works at a golf course, and so it's still a job for him, but he has the choice to do that, and he likes doing that. And then my mother-in-law has worked at a lot of different kind of retail spots, Hallmark, that kind of thing, because she really likes doing that, and she really likes the products. She really likes helping people. And so now both of my in-laws have been, my father-in-law has been retired for over 10 years. But he still works, and it's the freedom of choice because he can do that. And it's the same for you. You're able to choose what you want to do, something that's enriching and engaging, but it's not because you have to.
And that's really the key. It is that freedom. It's that freedom to choose. And I do think that when we're being challenged and growing professionally and personally, that's like a very, that's a spiritually fulfilling thing. And I just, you hear so many times that, people will retire and just be bored, and then 3 months later, they're out doing something again. So it's just, this just gives the freedom to do both.
I have one of the agents on my team, his dad just retired, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, and he's already looking for a project to do now, so that kind of stuff happens. For folks that, want to learn more about what you're doing with the W2 Landlord, how can they reach out, or how can they connect?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say they can email me at Kim@the W2 Landlord right now. And then also too, they can go on to Facebook. We have an active community. It's W2 Investors right now. So as of the podcast today, I'm working on revamping my website, but that should be available June 1st. And that is basically the W2landlord.com. So there's a lot of different areas that you can connect with me and get engaged. But I highly recommend joining the free group. There's a ton of great content there.
Yeah. Thank you for all that you're doing to help people. I mean, it's one thing to have the job, to do the work as a landlord, but then to be able to give back to people and help educate is awesome. So thanks. You have a wealth of information. You've accomplished a lot, and congratulations on that, and excited to see what you continue to do in the future.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Mike.